He was smiling when he walked into the ICU. Not the nervous, relieved kind of smile you'd expect from a brother who just found out his sister survived a car going off a mountain road. It was the other kind. The kind that doesn't quite reach the eyes. The kind that disappears the second he saw me sitting up in the hospital bed. Very much alive. Very much looking right back at him. That smile lasted maybe half a second before his face rearranged itself into something more appropriate. Concern. Shock. Trembling lip. The full performance. He was too late. I had already seen it. And so had the two detectives standing just outside my door. My name is Claire. I'm 29 years old. I work as a pediatric nurse at a hospital in Portland, Oregon. And 3 weeks before that moment, I had been sitting at my kitchen table at 11 o'clock at night reading through my brother's browser history on a laptop he'd left behind after visiting for the weekend. I wasn't snooping. He'd asked me to print something for him and forgotten to log out of his account. I clicked the wrong tab. What I found changed everything I thought I knew about my family. But I need to start from the beginning. Because the beginning matters. It always does. My brother Ryan is 34 years old. 5 years older than me, 6 feet tall, charming in the way that men who've never been told no tend to be charming. He could walk into a room and make everyone feel like the most interesting person he'd ever met. Growing up, I worshipped him. When our parents divorced and our mother moved us across 3 states to start over in Seattle, Ryan was the one who made it feel like an adventure instead of a catastrophe. He was the one who sat outside my bedroom door the night I cried for the first time in our new house and slid a granola bar under the gap because he didn't know what else to do. I ate that granola bar and I stopped crying and I thought, okay, as long as he's here, we'll be okay. I held on to that version of my brother for a very long time, even as the evidence against it quietly piled up. Ryan had been in financial trouble for years. Not the ordinary kind. The kind where you're stressed about rent and eating rice and beans until payday. The other kind. The kind with a name that people whisper. He'd taken loans from people who don't work out of offices. And when he couldn't pay, they found creative ways to remind him the clock was ticking. He'd borrowed money from our mother twice. Paid her back once. Borrowed again. He'd called me 6 months before everything happened, asking for $4,000, telling me it was for a car repair, and I'd sent it without blinking, because he was my brother, and I trusted him, and that's what you do for family. He never mentioned the car repair again. I never asked. Looking back, I understand that I was doing what a lot of people do when they love someone who is slowly becoming something dangerous. I was filling in the gaps with the best possible explanation. The car repair story was easier to believe than the alternative. The alternative would have required me to do something about it. He came to visit me in October, a long weekend. Just the two of us. He said he missed me. He said he wanted to take a drive up into the Columbia River Gorge like we used to do when we were kids, before Mom moved back to Seattle and left us both in Oregon as adults trying to figure out how to be a family without a structure around us. I said yes, immediately. I cleared my weekend. I made his favorite pasta for dinner the night he arrived, and we stayed up until 2 in the morning talking and laughing. And for a few hours I felt like I was 12 years old again, and the world was simple, and my brother was the person I needed him to be. He forgot his laptop when he left Sunday afternoon. Called me from the road. Said he'd grab it next time. I found the tabs that night. There were 7 of them open across the top of his browser. The first was the email I needed to print. The second was a news article about traffic patterns on Highway 30 near the gorge. The third was a Reddit thread titled something like car accident survival statistics at high elevation drop-offs. The fourth was a legal forum with the question, does a life insurance policy pay out for single vehicle accidents? The fifth was my name. More specifically, it was a cached view of my life insurance policy portal. The coverage amount, the listed beneficiary. His name. I sat at that table for a long time without moving. The pasta pan was still on the stove. The light above the kitchen sink was buzzing the way it always did when it was about to burn out. I sat there, and I let what I was looking at mean what it meant. Because it deserved that. Because I deserved that. No more filling in the gaps. No more best possible explanation. My brother had taken me on a scouting trip. He'd driven those roads with me in the passenger seat, watching me, watching the drops off the shoulder, calculating. He'd probably noted which stretches had no guardrails, which ones had the longest fall. He'd been charming and warm and laughed at all my jokes and told me he missed me. And somewhere underneath all of that, he had been doing math. I didn't sleep that night. I sat at my kitchen table until the sky went from black to gray to pale, cold pink, and then I picked up my phone. I did not call Ryan. I called my friend Desta, who is a paralegal, and who I knew would be awake because she's never in her life slept past 5:30. I told her everything. She told me to screenshot every tab. Don't close anything. Don't touch the laptop. Bring it to her in the morning. Then she said, and Claire, don't be alone with him again. Not until this is handled. I didn't ask what handled meant. I understood. Over the next 2 weeks, Desta helped me understand how life insurance policies worked. Specifically, what happened to beneficiaries, and what documentation was required to make a claim. We talked to a lawyer. We talked to a detective named Vasquez who worked out of the Portland precinct and who had, as it turned out, been watching Ryan for reasons that had nothing to do with me. Ryan's debts had led him into a circle of people who were themselves being investigated. Detective Vasquez was very interested in my laptop. He was also very interested in what Ryan might do next, and he asked me something I wasn't expecting. He asked if I would be willing to let it happen, not the accident. He was clear about that they would never let me get in a car with Ryan on those roads. But the plan, the sequence, if Ryan believed I still trusted him, still had no idea, he would eventually move forward. And if he moved forward, they would be ready. He asked if I could keep pretending for a little longer. I thought about the granola bar under the door. I thought about how I'd sent $4,000 without asking a single question. I thought about sitting in the passenger seat of Ryan's car driving through the gorge while he calculated drop angles. I told Detective Vasquez yes. The next part was the hardest thing I have ever done. And I want to be honest about that. Pretending is its own kind of violence. Every text I sent Ryan that felt warm and normal. Every phone call where I laughed at his jokes and asked about his life. Every miss you too and every let's plan another trip soon. It cost something. Not because I was performing love for someone I'd stopped loving. It cost something because I hadn't stopped. That's the thing nobody tells you about betrayal by someone you love. The love doesn't switch off cleanly. You grieve it while you're still in the middle of it. You mourn a person who is standing right in front of you, still wearing the face you grew up trusting. Ryan called me on a Thursday in mid-November and suggested we go back up to the gorge. He said he'd found a new trail, a harder one, and he thought it would be good for us. Maybe drive up Friday after my shift, spend the night at a cabin, hike Saturday, drive back Sunday. He sounded exactly like my brother. Exactly like the person who slid a granola bar under a door in a house that felt too big and too strange, and said without words, "I'm still here. I still have you." I said that sounded perfect. I hung up and immediately called Detective Vasquez. What I'm about to tell you is what I know from the official record, from what the detectives told me afterward, from the court documents, and from some things Ryan eventually said himself in depositions that I read sitting in a lawyer's office 18 months later, with my hands folded very still in my lap. Ryan's plan was this: drive me up to a specific stretch of Highway 30, where he'd already identified a section of road that had been damaged in a recent storm. The shoulder was unstable. There was a significant drop. He was going to tell me he needed to take a call, pull over, ask me to take the wheel, and while I was distracted with the unfamiliar car on an unfamiliar mountain road, he was going to cause the car to go off the edge. He had a way out mapped. I did not. He had already drafted the letter to my insurance company. The detectives found it on his phone. He'd looked up the claim process 4 separate times. He'd even written a draft of what he planned to say at my memorial. None of that happened, because Detective Vasquez and his team were in position on that highway before Ryan and I ever left Portland. They had 2 vehicles ahead of us and 1 behind. They were tracking both our phones. They had a warrant. What actually happened was this. We drove up together, and Ryan was warm and funny, and perfect. The way he always was when he wanted something. About 40 minutes into the drive, he said he needed to make a quick call for work and asked if I could take the wheel for a few minutes. He pulled over at a scenic overlook, and I saw his eyes go to the drop below, the way the road crumbled at the edge, the particular quality of the light in that moment, golden and ordinary, and oblivious. I said sure. I got out to walk around to the driver's side. That's when Detective Vasquez's vehicle pulled in behind us. Ryan didn't run. I think part of him had always known, somewhere under all of it, that this was always going to be how it ended. He stood on the side of that mountain road in a gray jacket I'd seen him wear 100 times, and he watched them walk toward him, and something in his face just settled, like he'd been holding something very heavy for a very long time and had finally, exhaustedly, put it down. He looked at me once. I don't know exactly what he was looking for. Maybe he wanted to see if I was surprised. Maybe he wanted to see if I was devastated. Maybe some small part of him wanted me to do what I'd always done, fill in the gap, find the best possible explanation, make it mean something softer than what it was. I looked back at him. I didn't fill anything in. They put him in the back of the car, and I stood on the side of Highway 30, with the river far below, and the cold November air moving through the gorge, and I breathed in and breathed out, and told myself to keep doing that until it felt automatic again. It took a while. Ryan was charged with conspiracy to commit murder, insurance fraud, and a third charge related to the people he owed money to, and what he'd agreed to do for them to buy himself time. I won't get into that here, but it was its own layer of a story I'm still sometimes surprised I was standing inside of without knowing. His lawyer tried to argue that the browser history was circumstantial, that the drafted letter was just a dark thought exercise, that the overlook stop was coincidental. The jury took 11 hours. I sat in the courtroom on the last day and watched the verdict come back, and I noticed I was very calm. Not numb. Calm. Those are different things, and it took me a long time to understand the difference. He was sentenced to 17 years. My mother called me after the sentencing. She cried for a long time, and I let her. Because she needed to, and because I understood that she was grieving 2 children at once, the son she was losing and the version of me she'd never quite seen before. Afterward, she asked if I was angry with her. I told her no. I told her that Ryan's choices were Ryan's choices, and that I had loved him genuinely, and that loving someone genuinely, and being willing to hold them accountable are not opposites. They can live in the same body at the same time. They can both be true. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "When did you get so wise?" I said, "I had a good teacher." I meant her. I also meant everything that had happened. I meant the granola bar, and the browser tabs, and the mountain road, and Detective Vasquez, and Desta, who answered the phone at 5 in the morning, and all of it, all of the beautiful and terrible education of being a person who learned the hard way that loving someone does not mean making yourself available to be destroyed by them. I changed my life insurance policy the week after the trial. I listed Desta as beneficiary. She cried when I told her, which is very unlike her. And then she immediately said something dry and practical about making sure I updated it if I ever got married, which is very much like her. I still live in Portland. I still work pediatric nursing, which some people find surprising given everything they assume I'd want something quieter, something with less urgency, but I think that's exactly backward. I want to be somewhere that matters. I want to be in a room where what I do is the difference between one outcome and another. I learned I can do that. I learned I'm someone who can sit at a kitchen table at 11 o'clock at night and look at something unbearable and not look away from it. That's not nothing. That's actually everything. People ask me sometimes if I miss him. They usually ask it carefully, like the question itself might be dangerous. I think what they're really asking is whether I feel guilty, whether I think I should have handled it differently, been less suspicious, given him the benefit of the doubt one more time. I tell them the truth. I miss the brother I thought he was. I grieve him the way you grieve someone who died years ago, even though the death was so slow and so quiet that you didn't realize you were at a funeral until it was already over. I do not miss being the person who sent $4,000 without asking a question. I do not miss filling in gaps. I do not miss performing trust I'd quietly stopped feeling because the alternative was something I wasn't ready to face. I'm ready now. That's the thing I want you to hear if you're listening to this and you recognize something in it. Not the extreme circumstances, maybe, but the feeling underneath the way you've been making excuses for someone for so long that the excuses have become a second language, fluent and automatic and exhausting. The way love and fear can look so identical from the inside that you stop being able to tell them apart. You are allowed to tell them apart. You are allowed to look at what's actually in front of you, without softening it, without translating it into something more manageable. You are allowed to make the call at 5 in the morning. You are allowed to say yes to the detective who asks if you're willing to let the truth finish its own sentence. There's a version of this story where I stay quiet, where I close the browser tabs and tell myself I misunderstood, or that Ryan would never really, or that maybe I owe him the benefit of the doubt after everything we've been through together. I've thought about that version a lot. I understand exactly how easy it would have been to choose it. I'm glad I chose this one instead. I'm Claire. I chose myself, and I do it again every single time.